Hi everyone, how's it going? I hope you're well. We want to welcome you to the Three Neighbors. If you're joining us for the first time, I hope you hang in there. This is where we talk about everything fun, and challenging and political and cultural and sporty, whatever it is. But essentially, the idea is to make sure that we'll bring you back to really understand what it means to being a good neighbor, and how we can sort of talk about things in a way that not only challenges our thoughts, but also help us refine how we see things and see the world in general. And so I'm Vic, and this is Dave, and that's Kevin, and this are the Three Neighbors, and we want to welcome you to this channel. Now, today we have a lot of things to talk about, but last week we had started off talking about just general introductions around how we met. And one of the things that I forgot to mention was also, I think I focused more on how I met Kevin last week, but I didn't talk so much about how I met Dave. And I think, of course, after we exchanged Christmas gifts and all, one of the things that happened was Dave had invited me to his place. But before that, I had an experience that was very fascinating. For the first time in my life, I had to see a gun up close coming to America. And this was just in a dinner session where I had, I think one of my colleagues invited me for Thanksgiving. And we're just having dinner. And for some reason, I saw something that looked kind of blackish in someone's clothes. I'm like, is that a gun? and and I was frightened because I've not seen a gun that up close in my life. And the gentleman was like, yes. And I was like, what do you need a gun for? Because he was just a young boy. And he said, well, it's for my protection. I'm like, how old are you? He's like 21 years and you need a gun? That blew my mind away, right? And so I came back and I started to talk to Dave about this incident. And Dave was like, you know what? It was Dave started to introduce me to the culture. And that was very helpful because it enabled me to kind of learn a bit more about the gun culture in America, which I was very ignorant about. Had no idea how that meant a lot for most people who saw it as a sport. Now, to cut the long story short, Dave took me out on the ranges where we kind of and showed me how to shoot and all that, which I think was very cool. And after that, guess what? I kind of like guns, like it's like a sport for me now. Of course, I don't own any of it, though Dave had offered to buy me one. But I said no.
But buy me one.
but it's fascinating. So today we kind of want to dabble into the gun culture a little bit in the U.S., in America, and also share perspectives about what we think. We all have different views about this. I think. Anyway, I'll let my friends to kind of talk about what they think. Do we start with Dave? Really, Dave? What's your take on the gun culture thing?
I love it. I mean, for me, I have several, and then of course my background in law enforcement, and then as a contractor overseas, it's just part of your daily life. You carry it everywhere. And I think one thing that I wanted to add to your dialogue was that we discussed and covered safety more than anything else in the very beginning.
Right.
I think that's what's lacking here in this country. We talk about it. This is first of all, you talked about you didn't understand how this 21-year-old needed a gun, and my response to you was, well, I've never read the Bill of Needs. It's the Bill of Rights. So
right.
It's a right for us to carry this, that, and the other. But
yeah.
I think it's crazy that here in the state of Virginia, we have an open carry law. So you don't have to have any training, any safety recognition for you to carry a gun if it's in plain view. But if you have a concealed weapons permit, you have to go through a gun safety class. So I'm kind of torn on that a little bit. I understand, but I think if you're gonna carry any type of weapon outside of your residence, you should be given at least a basic training and safety on that. But I will say it was pretty funny for you to walk in that day for the first time.
Yeah.
And for those of you that are just watching, so Vic's wife, when I offered to introduce him to weapons, she was actually saying that would be a great opportunity. And he's over there like, no, I'm not interested in this. I think she kind of nudged you.
I think part of the reason also perhaps the dad was in the Army, I think, in the Navy as well.
Mm-hmm.
So she was kind of used to that to some degree. But for me, it was like the first time I've never held a gun in my hands. And the idea, maybe also it might have something to do with how we're being socialized to see guns as something bad, right? And just the idea of just having one is just terrifying, or and also how we associate that to death. It's maybe it might be the other thing. What about you? What's your position about the whole thing about guns?
Well, I think when you talk about guns and you talk about gun control, I like to shift the narrative to more of gun culture. I mean, I think in America, growing up here in this country, there's 400 million guns in this country. There's more guns than there are people.
That's right.
So, at some point, you're going to come in contact with guns, whether you see them laying around in somebody's house, whether you see them on police officers, where you see them in the criminal aspect. It's just a part of the American culture. Unfortunately, with that gun ownership is that illegal aspect of gun ownership that leads to, more violent crimes. And unfortunately, the results of that violence and death in this country it's astounding. It's unfortunate, but I don't think there's anything that we can do at this point to control that. I know that's the conversation, that's the dream, but I hate to be cynical, but I don't know what legislation you could put in place that would control guns. I don't know what the statistic is on stolen guns in this country, but it's astounding. So I think from a legal standpoint and illegal ownership, they're probably pretty close neck and neck. I don't know if you know that statistic or not, but
No, I don't. But
I know it's fairly close. So to legislate people who lawfully own guns, what do you do about the folks that illegally own guns? So what do you do with that? So I always question when you start talking about gun control and legislating new laws, like to do what?
yeah, the laws are already on the books.
Yeah.
So just enforce it. But it's kind of like let's say you go to banning cars. We're banning cars. You can no longer drive cars. Well, let's say we had as many cars as we do guns. How do you get rid of 400? To your point, 400 million guns? Like, it's not going to happen.
No.
So, the only thing that's what they say, worse than a good guy with a gun's a bad guy with a gun. To your point, you go and legislate that all you want. It's only going to hurt the law-abiding citizens. They're called criminals for a reason because they don't follow the law. So yeah, that's where we stand on that. So I think that for somebody that was like Vic, who was hesitant about it, my goal was not to debate with him on that. It was to educate him.
Right.
And I will say you did a wonderful job by the end of that.
Yeah,
I think we spent 4 or 5 hours together.
Yeah, it was fun. I like it was the first time, man. But then after that experience, I kind of see why kind of people, kind of embrace the gun culture. But one of the things that kind of picked out from that experience is the fact that it seemed like more of a sport than anything for most people. Would you consider owning a gun as a sport?
Well, you mentioned that. You kind of related that to golf.
Yeah. It's like taking away people's golf club.
Yeah.
Like, most people wouldn't like that. So if someone had seen a gun as some kind of sports that he or she engages in, and you take that away from them, I think not everyone would like that.
Yeah. So whether it's sport, home protection, home defense, whatever the case is, it's what you want to use it as. I remember walking into the gun store, which was like a small Walmart, and your eyes just lit up. Everybody had a gun on their side, and then there was every type of weapon in the wall.
I know. I'm like,
Whoa, it was a major culture shock. But you going in there brand new, and we vocalized that with a couple of people.
Yeah.
How were you treated?
I think people were nice, but I think my problem had always been when you think about someone having a gun, it's like you always associate it with the person. What if the person uses that, right? That's a fear that comes with that. I don't know where the fear comes from, right? So do you think that when you use a gun from an early on stage, that kind of takes away the fear? Or would you always have that?
I just think it's part of your life. For me personally, if I'm carrying, and I carry a lot, but if I'm carrying and there's some type of confrontation that I'm dealing with, I am more likely to back down, to get out of that situation than I would if I wouldn't have.
Right.
I just feel like I'm more responsible when I'm carrying.
A situation that you observe or a situation that you're personally in?
Personally in.
Okay.
Like if I get into some type of dispute or altercation with somebody, I'm more likely to back down and just, separate myself, because now I don't know if he or she has a gun, but I know I have one. So now I know there's one gun in that altercation. So I try to step away from, just get away from that. I'm more aware of it.
But then, what can we do? What can the government do about? You mentioned the illegal gun, because you think that's a solution to that, or are you saying that people that are legally allowed to carry a weapon should carry a weapon, but those that are not legally allowed shouldn't? And what makes one, aside from the mental health problems and background check, are the other things that?
When I say illegally carry
Yeah.
guns, I'm referring to folks that acquire guns through illegal means.
Right.
Because, like I said, I'm sorry, I don't have the statistic.
But there are reasons why people would do that, especially given the fact if, let's say, for example, they still want to protect themselves, but then they're not allowed to get a gun legally because of either laws. And I heard that felons are also not allowed to get a gun.
That's right.
So what do we, for those particular individuals, for example, don't they have right to own guns?
No, you gave up those rights when you were not charged with a felony, but
Yeah.
convicted of a felony by a judge or a jury.
So in other words, it means their life should be at risk because of that history. And perhaps maybe they've also served some kind of sentence, So don't you think that's unfair in some sense?
Yeah, I do. But I think that it overshadows the desire to have a gun in this country. If you desire to have a gun, whether you obtain it legally or illegally, you will own a gun. If you have the desire, you have the will, you will have
But that's where the problem is, though, because now for those people, let's say someone that just committed a crime or went to prison for it or came back, and it's very likely the person might not even find accommodation in a good neighborhood, right? And they end up living in some, I think, apologies for using this American lingo, but it's, I think, ghetto, that's what they call it. Like a place where you have that's a low socioeconomic
low-income housing.
Yeah. And so there's a tendency for violence to be the norm in those places. So the person might settle to find, or you live in a place like that, where that's it's very likely the person might get shot just walking down the road. So doesn't this person have a right to protect themselves?
According to the law, no.
So they should. That doesn't make sense, and that's where the illegal, because someone like that is very much likely to want to secure a firearm illegally to protect themselves.
I don't know if that's the whole motivation for obtaining a gun illegally, but it's just it's just a fact. But we can't even quantify how many guns are actually stolen because everybody doesn't report when their guns are stolen. But even the reported numbers are still staggering.
Yeah.
But it's underreported.
Right.
So, but those guns are in somebody's hands.
Then you got a stolen gun that's stolen,
Right.
and then you have those unlimited statistics as well.
Yeah.
But hey, look, I'm on your side on this. I think if you were charged with a felony for stealing a ride lawnmower that has nothing to do with weapons, I think you should, once you've paid your debt to society, you should be able to get your voting rights back and your gun rights back and everything else. That's just my opinion. Now, if you use the weapon to carjack somebody, to rob somebody, to maim somebody, and all of a sudden you paid your debt to society, I'm sorry, you gave that up.
And in other words, you also gave up your right to kind of defend yourself.
Well, to Kevin's point, he said it best. Whether it's illegally or legally, if that person wants to acquire a weapon, he or she's going to do that. Now,
But then,
in those circumstances, if I'm a felon, I'm probably going to take my chances.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. But I also believe in those crimes that you named. If you're caught with a gun illegally, then you'll never get rights back. So even if you could obtain a gun legally, but you own one illegally, and you get caught with that gun on a traffic stop, you should lose your rights. Why are we having this discussion? Like, this is common sense stuff.
No, but I'm also thinking about from a fair, trying to be fair to everyone, right? So that everyone have that right to protect themselves. Because it sounds like what we're saying is that essentially for those that have perpetrated some kind of crime and served, government sentence and did their time, and when they return to the society, they don't have a right to defend themselves.
You can defend yourself, you just won't be able to do it with firearms.
Yeah, but then in situations where that's what's required, and so it means that it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and we talked about the felony in general.
Yeah.
And then I made a remark about stealing a lawnmower that's the value, and then the forcible felonies that we talked about.
Right.
I'm sure somebody at home is probably going, "Hey, what about this? Hey, put them in the comments. We would and we'll cover that. We would love to go down that road too. And I'm sure somebody at home is probably going, "Hey, what about this?" And we can come back and talk about it. Say, you know what, this person's right. Let's speak about that. I don't even like the word gun control. I don't even like that saying.
Right.
Not the word, but just that saying of gun control. It just sounds like they're trying to put restrictions on you. It's more gun awareness, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, whatever. But I think if you're talking about the safety, how to properly use it, know when to use it, it's an opinion. You mentioned earlier, I think you asked the question of the person who can carry, should they carry? That's up to that person. But if you shouldn't carry, that's up to that person too.
Right.
Now you've got to.
But of course, actually,
There's consequences.
Yeah. That's. Do you think that there will be a time in this country when there will be a national conversation? I know it's already going on, but not to the point where that significant policy changes, where there will be a national conversation and move towards actually disbanding the use of guns. You think it will happen, let's say, in the next 50 years from now?
I don't see it. I don't see it.
What, if it happens, what do you think might be the intended, the compounding consequence from that?
There's no way that you're going to confiscate 400 million guns. And let's say the Congress passes that law.
Yeah.
Tell me a law enforcement agency that's going to enforce that.
I don't even see a path. I don't even see a path.
I don't either.
I don't even see a pathway. I think there's all the crazy things we could imagine taking place before we get an absolute gun confiscation.
But let's say, for example, that comes to be, right? And that president just gets into the office, and part of the things or the agenda he has is that the use of guns. Now, of course, on one hand, we know. Do you think there will be some kind of civil war because of that? Because there's been issue around gun controls in America itself. Or if that would be the case, how would the government actually take away almost all 400 guns? Of course, on one hand, we do know that at least the government is aware, have some kind of registry of those that own guns.
No.
So when people buy guns, they're not like recorded and they don't have like a system where that is stored.
Yes and no. So if I go to a gun store and I buy a handgun, there's going to be a record of that. However, I want to get rid of that gun. Maybe Kevin comes over, sees it. We go down, we go shoot, and he's like, "Wow, I really like this. This is, I know Kevin's not a felon, and I know he's responsible. We're friends. You don't seem to have any but being sarcastic. But I can sell him that weapon,
right,
without any government involvement whatsoever.
I see.
So now it's going to be a matter of, and I know the government's trying to change that, so they get an idea of who has what guns, which quite frankly is none of their damn business because it is that right. But if they come to me and say, "Hey, we noticed you bought this weapon," I'm going to say, "Hey, I sold it to Kevin." Well, they go to Kevin. Kevin's going to be like, "Hey, I sold it to Vic." Vic's like, "Hey, I sold it." Finally, just be like, "All right, we don't know where this is." So you're not going to be able to track all of those.
But at least to some greater degree, at least those that still have theirs and it's on the system, it's possible to withdraw those from the people that owns it. But then, if they want to, the law might be, if you own a gun or ever cover the gun, then there is some kind of jail sentence to that. Do you think that will discourage people from using a gun if the government decide to go that route?
No, because again, the government is always this paper tigers, right? They're big and mean, but what they're saying is, hey, this is now law. You have to enforce it. And the sheriffs or the police chiefs, like, I'm not sending my men and women out there to go physically confiscate weapons. So you would have to have a public that's completely compliant to the government, which is the reason we have the Second Amendment altogether. It wasn't against foreign enemies. It was against our own government. That's the reason why we have the right to possess those. So there's no way. And I'm hoping we can talk about digital currency. I know that was a topic we had talked about. The difference between digital currency is they can sit behind computers and actually regulate that.
Right.
When you have a physical weapon that they have to come to your house and confiscate from you, to Kevin's point, it'll never happen. Never.
That's an interesting one. I would like to know what you think. Do you think there will be a time in American history where there's a new law banning guns. And what do you think that will look like? And what do you think might be the consequences doing that? But I think on the other hand, let's talk about general behavior that people have around guns. Do you think, at what age, for example, is it wise or understandable to kind of teach, let's say, your kids how to use a gun? Or do you have to start with? Personally, I think I don't see the point of it, right? Because
What do you mean you don't see the point of what?
the point of them learning how to shoot a gun, except maybe they're going into a military so they can get those training there. But just because I'm not thinking, I know it's good to plan better as a father and as a man, just what if something happens? But is there some kind of side to that where most people that use guns are always thinking that maybe something bad might happen? And I appreciate that most of them might want to prepare for that. But is it something to the point where we even extend that? Are we going to say that we're extending that, whether it's fear or whether it's caution, extending that to our families and trying to teach them how to use a gun? Is it at what age? And should we even? I'd like to hear your two views.
I think you have to start with the maturity of the child. But I also think teaching the child how to shoot a gun is as simple as teaching the child how to fish. And that's not saying you have to teach them how to shoot a gun for gun ownership or for protection purposes.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, it's a sport. I mean,
Right.
get them familiar with it, get them comfortable with
And
it.
what if after teaching the child and the child wants to own one, would you tell the child no?
I'd have to ponder on that. I haven't been faced with that. I wouldn't have a problem. I mean, in this country, 18, you have to be 18 in order to own a gun.
Yeah. 18 is still a child, though.
It's still a child.
Yeah.
But I'd have to really dive into the reason why my 18, 19, 20-year-old child needs a gun at that point.
They want to protect themselves.
I'm not opposed to it, but I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah.
But I guess I'd have to seek more to understand. I don't want to, 18, 19, I know 18, 19. I kind of had a hot head. So, I wasn't carrying a gun at 18, 19, 20 years old. So,
But mind you, remember, if you don't give the child the gun, the child might just still get one.
I can't, 18, 19, I can only control what I can control. But if my 18, 19, 20-year-old child's coming to me saying that they need a firearm,
Right.
I guess we will have to have some additional conversation and really seek to understand why they feel that need to do that. Like I said, 18, 19, I was out.
Yeah.
I didn't need
Also, maybe the environment that you leave as well. There was, need to kind of protect yourself as well.
What do you think? What do you think about the age? What should the age be?
Personally, I don't think the way I'm not just raised, but I don't think it's normal for someone to just want to have a gun. I'm still kind of trying to process and deal with that, and I also accept the fact that it's a culture here, right? Now, after the lesson that you gave me on how to use a gun, that was really quite enlightening personally. That I'm like, oh, wait a minute, actually, you could actually go to a Rangers and just have fun with this. It's a lot of adrenaline that comes just doing that, right? Personally, for me, I don't know if I would want to teach my son or my daughter how to use a gun, because I'm like, why do you need it? Except maybe, even in a really bad place.
Or it goes back to that conversation as to why. I mean, I don't know if you want to share, but did you get your kids go?
Oh, absolutely. Nothing 18, 19,
Yeah.
12, 13. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what was the motivation?
Because I was a police officer, there was going to be guns in my house, and I wanted to educate them. I'll give you a scenario. Because you or somebody else says, hey, I want to protect my kid, and I want them to have weapons. I respect that. But let's say the police are chasing somebody, behind our homes, and they throw a weapon over the fence into your yard, and your son finds it. What do you think he's going to do?
Good question. But
I think you know.
well, let's hope that doesn't happen. And you know why I say that? That's why it's important to live in a good neighborhood where
This can happen anywhere. But I'm saying, I'm not saying you've got to teach them to be sharpshooters, but you do got to give them the what if. You got to say, hey, this is a gun. This is what it looks like. You talked about the cartoons earlier. Daffy Duck gets shot in the head. Look, that's realistically that face is not coming back together. That person's gone for it. It's a life-changing event. But I would say educate children on that guns aren't bad
Right.
if used properly. And if you find a weapon, what do you do? Because sheltering them is not the answer. I think Kevin probably had the best response on, hey, if your 18-year-old wants to comes to you and says, hey, I want to have a gun, I need a gun. Okay, that's great. Let's have that discussion. I need to know why. Instead of him going, no, we're not having that discussion. Now, he's closed-minded, so now, so now that person, because there's no discussion.
Yeah.
So I want to have that discussion. I'll tell you when, and probably, hindsight's 2020, right? But looking back, it wasn't a good idea. But my service weapon was always on the dresser. I knew my kids weren't going to mess with it. And because I educated them, my kids also knew when they had friends over, they're not to go in my room. And if they were to go in my room, I knew my children would prevent that. Now, should have had it in the gun lock and safe, and I'm mad, maybe I should have. But growing up, I always had weapons, and
But your kid.
Yeah.
As a father, your kid.
Absolutely. Now, I also know if somebody's coming over here with kids, I am, hey, I know where my weapons are. Let me go ahead and make sure they're out of the way. So there's a lot of personal responsibility.
I'm just listening to you, and I feel like that's a lot of responsibility. Just having a gun, because like you got it, because any mistake, like I don't know if it's worth it though. Like putting ourselves under such kind of pressure. Personally, but I'd like to hear what you all think. At what age should we teach our kids how to use a gun, or should we not at all? Dave thinks probably 12 or so.
I was being sarcastic. I think it's based on maturity. I use the babysitter analogy.
Right.
There's no age on when you should be a babysitter out of the state of Virginia, right? But maybe there is. The law, I haven't been updated on the new law, but it's just going to be based on, look, there's certain 16-year-olds that shouldn't be babysitting kids. There's 14-year-olds that are probably more mature than some 17, 18-year-olds. So to Kevin's point, I think it is based on maturity and when you can do that. But I will pose this question, or I'll pose this question. If you think, not to possess, but to actually physically own, if you think that the age to own a gun should be 20, 25 or 21, then I'll agree with you either way. But we're going to do the same thing for voting. Because if you're not responsible to carry a firearm, then you shouldn't be responsible enough to vote.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's a fair balance, I think. Yeah,
it's fair.
Yeah. Is it possible that owning a gun, especially when you teach that to your kids, that it might have consequences later on for them in terms of the career choices that they make and the decisions that they make later in life? Now, we'll come back to that question. I would like you to also ponder on that as I will come back and just answer that question in a bit. Hi guys, welcome back to the Three Neighbors. If you're joining us for the first time, my name is Victor, and this is Dave, and this is Kevin, and we're all the Three Neighbors. Just, every Saturday we want to make it a habit just to come together, just talk about things happening around the culture, things that is impacting us, and things that we are fuming about, and just have conversations, right, to help us kind of unpack that and share perspective and have dialogue. And I think that's a beautiful thing about this, and have an opportunity to just connect, on Saturdays, and just have fun. So welcome. Now we're talking about gun control, gun ownership, owning a gun, and my experience, Kevin's experience, Dave's experience. But I wanted we ended up by kind of asking a question whether owning a gun or exposing our kids to owning a gun, whether that has later consequences, or not. Consequence sounds negative. Does it kind of influence the career choices of our kids? Now, I want to put this in context. We live in the state of Virginia. For most of you don't know, Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, it's like a military state, sort of. So most of the people, I don't know the percentage, but I know the greater percentage of people living in the state of Virginia are veterans, isn't it? So that has implication, and it makes sense if you're living in a state like this. Gun ownership, it's kind of something very common. Now, my question is, does that exposure to gun ownership at a very young age, especially for our kids, does that influence their career choices? Maybe most of them wanted to join law enforcement. For example, Dave's daughter is actually a police officer. Or maybe does it influence the child maybe thinking about, let's say, for example, joining the military as well. what are some of the consequences of those kind of exposure? And maybe such kind of exposure, does it impact the child? And maybe they have a completely different career decision that it has nothing to do with using or owning guns. But I'd like to hear Dave and Kevin's thought on this. And of course, if you have your perspective, feel free to kind of drop that in the comment and ask questions. And maybe next week we would pick up from that. What do you think?
Go ahead.
I don't know if gun ownership or being exposed to guns at an early age really scripts your occupational choices. I mean, I don't know if there's a correlation there. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I'm just thinking about it. Because the excitement that comes with it, the adrenaline. Like
You had two kids that, I didn't mean to cut you off. You had two kids, you had one that went into a path, I don't know if it's because of the exposure of guns or just based upon your career, and you had one that went in a totally different, direction. So,
Yeah.
I think it's how you're raised too. You'll notice a lot of police officers will pass on from generation. Same way with the military, where it goes from generation to generation. So I think about it's if you're in the public service, you not only have law enforcement, but for those who in the rural areas and west of where we're at now, there's a lot of rural areas. There's a lot of hunting. A lot of those people tend to become game wardens, wildlife officers, and stuff like that, protecting the environment. And then you have others that want to join the police department or go into the FBI, state police, whatever. I agree with Kevin. I just think that it doesn't persuade you one way or the other. My son, like you said, is a college professor, and he would rather not have anything to do with guns. But I will tell you this: if he finds one and he picks one up, he knows what to do with it. Yeah, he does.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. So I mean, it's. Do I think he should have a gun? No, I don't. But if he wants one, I think he should have a gun.
You don't think he should have a gun? I'm confused.
No, because it's his choice.
Right.
I'm
Okay.
going to back his choice. So,
Okay.
he and his wife say, we don't need a gun. Hey, I support that. Now, if he were to come to me tomorrow and say, hey, I'm looking to get a firearm, what do you recommend? I would support that too. So it to me, it makes no difference on whether somebody owns a firearm or not.
It's fascinating. I'm just thinking whether that early exposure to firearms have a correlation with career decisions and choices, and what could have caused that. Sounds like both of you are thinking possibly no.
I'd say probably not. Like I said, I think what you just said, Dave, about past experiences with, growing up with a father in law enforcement, a mother, military, kind of the same thing. You kind of follow that path. I think there's a correlation.
So it has nothing to do with the power that comes with owning a gun. And okay.
And maybe some of the audience would
Yeah. I would like to hear your views.
Love
Do you think that that kind of early exposure to gun ownership, for a child, that would influence their career decisions? And if also you've experienced that, or maybe you're in law enforcement or in a particular career field, is that due to that early exposure to gun? Because I think that's something that will be interesting to look at some research that's been done around that. I'm not sure research around that, whether that's a correlation, but conceptually, I could see that shaping some things. I'm not saying it's a direct impact. There could be all the in-between factors, essentially, that shape that relationship. But it's been wonderful talking today about guns. And even at the end of this conversation, I'm still not convinced that I still need to get one. So,
and I support that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. But the piece that I have also is knowing that I have neighbors that at least I know one that owns a gun, and he doesn't shy away from that. I'm not sure about this man, whether he owns a gun or not, but
There's 400 million guns in this country. I mean,
So does he have one or doesn't he have one?
I will say I do not conceal carry. I don't have the need to on a daily basis carry a gun.
Okay.
That may change
Right.
in the future, but right now,
There's no need.
It's kind of hard to conceal a cannon.
Yeah. But hey, guys, it's been wonderful talking to this man, and it's all the best.
Yes, sir.
And we'll see you guys next week. And this is the Three Neighbors. You take care.
Thanks.
Bye. That went well. The last part was fun. Yeah. And it's unfortunate how Mike's situation happened.